Hello, this is the State Library's webinar on federal documents for K through 12 students, and also by extension, federal documents for teachers. We are going to briefly start with some physical documents. There are very few out there anymore. The federal government has been pretty aggressive about going to online only, although it also means they have some great interactive options on their websites that can be much better than just a booklet. Some wonderful videos and games, and we'll look at those. But we'll start with what you can find here in North Dakota. There are two places, UND, their library, and NDSU. What they do is they share the federal document depository requirement, which means in most states there's one library who has to get everything the federal document publishes, whether it's relevant to their own state or not, which, as you can imagine, is thousands of pieces of paper every year. UND and NDSU share that responsibility. So they each have half of everything that's published, and some of it is for kids. So UND has about 100 print resources. The best way to find it is you do a search on juvenile literature. Outside of Dewey and Sears, if you're using Library of Congress, which is what school libraries don't use and public libraries don't use, but academic libraries use, and also the state library uses, juvenile literature is the term for juvenile nonfiction, which is confusing because it's literature. And then juvenile fiction is when you want fiction. Initially, we get 5,000 resources, but then we narrow it down by library, all the other libraries. So then we narrow it down for just Chester Fritz. And then we also do resource type federal documents. Let's see, it's already gotten much smaller. And then also you'll want resource type books. You don't want CDs, microfiche, or online. And so actually now we're down to 82 items. And some of these do have electronic resources included as well. But lots of NASA. NASA publishes all kinds of things for children. Disability awareness for children, hurricanes, more hurricanes, safety inside and outside the workplace, an activity book. So these are the sorts of things that you can actually check out. Of course, with any of these activity books and coloring books, you would then need to photocopy the pages. But because they are government documents, you don't need to worry about copyright. And then the same thing works over at NDSU, and they don't have duplication. They because they've divided up all the different federal agencies, the federal documents at one library are completely different from the federal documents at another. So we'll go into advanced search over at NDSU. And of course, you could also just contact a librarian for help finding this stuff. Either the state library, we're always here to do more complicated subject searches for you, or the libraries at those universities. You can even email us subject requests, and like if it's the evening or the weekend, or just you think it'll take a bunch of time, and we'll get back to you later. Nobody asks reference questions anymore, so it's always exciting when we get one. Okay, so juvenile literature. Oh, and also keyword, in this case, federal documents. The searches are not quite the same because they have different catalog software. And then we narrow it down to, in this case, available for checkout means it's a physical item. And mostly you can see what they have, knees lifted high, plate full of color. These are all nutrition documents for kids. It's not giving you a fancy look at the cover. But in fact, there's a whole series of books, and we have them here at the State Library as well in this case, of diabetes prevention geared to a Native American audience. Julian the Atom, so something on nuclear. So again, more activity books, the Lorax. So you have plenty of opportunities here to have things you can photocopy and use in the classroom. The Junior Ranger activity books, they sound really nifty, and they have them at both libraries. The challenge is, it's too bad there's not a visual. They are written for the most part to be used at one of their sites, like at a specific national park. And a lot of the puzzles and games inside are assuming you're standing there and can refer to the exhibits there. So you'd want to look through those online before you actually make plans for those. Unless, of course, it's a guide for a North Dakota park and you guys are going on a field trip. So that's it for physical items. So the most famous guide for children that the federal government puts out is Ben's Guide. And they update it every few years, and they like to put out informational bookmarks and stuff on it. But it is actually pretty limited in what it does. It's strictly information on the US government, as opposed to information about other things produced by the government. So it is divided up by different ages and leveled accordingly in terms of the difficulty. So branches of government, how laws are made, symbols, songs, and structures, all your basic federally recognized tribes, all your basic stuff. And there are games plus printable activities. But this one is really great, especially if you have kids who are interested in the geography bee. It's simple, but it's pretty cool. So you have all the states jumbled up here at the bottom, and it does tell you once you click and drag on it which one it is. So that lets you start to figure it out. And it tells you who the capital is. Hopefully here, up here is where it's happening. And once you get really close, it turns green. But you still have to have a general idea of where you're going. So that's a fun activity for younger kids to figure out where all the states are. Okay, and then USA.gov used to have a lot more resources for teachers than it used to, but they still have a few. At this point, they just have how to write a book report, which is your basic how to write a book report, and lesson plans. So explaining taxes to kids, field trip to the money factory, how a bill becomes law, design your own president poster. So just a handful of items. This is what used to be kids.gov, but they've really pretty much retired it. Okay, now we are moving into the pages put out by individual government agencies in no particular order. The first one is FBI Kids. They start with resources for ages 3rd grade through 8th grade on staying safe online. There's also a program for teens on countering violent extremism. And then a little happier, the fun and games page. It's under construction. You can go into the archives and it will still work, but if you just go directly, it is a Flash version. But if you poke around, this is the text version for if you don't have Flash, because I don't right now. But there's kindergarten through 5th grade resources and middle school through 12th grade resources and some games in the Flash version. Similarly, there is a Kid Zone on the CIA's website, also broken out to be age appropriate. They have some fun games for K through 5th grade. And you can do a tour of the headquarters. And 6 through 12, again, these sections are just more information on the CIA itself. But then if you go into games, there is World Exploration. That's a geography game that is trivia, kind of like Carmen Sandiego. And then some other challenge, code breaking, concentration, word find. And then for parents and teachers, there are a few suggested lesson plans using the CIA website, more on internet safety. And then one other really nifty thing that is on the CIA website that is not necessarily specific to children. Here we go. Frequently requested records. And what these are is declassified reports on the subjects that people are most interested in. And these are topics, especially once you get into the high school level, that kids end up being interested. For example, UFOs, fact or fiction, this is actually the official Roswell documentation. So that's where they hide it. And then there are a few other things like Nazi war crimes, Bay of Pigs, the Rosenbergs, Francis Gary Powers, but mostly this is where you find all the Roswell stuff. Next, we have NASA. NASA has all kinds of stuff for kids, as some of you already know, because there's that NASA at My Library program that North Dakota was able to participate in. But they have web pages for students, for educators. They have a kids club where things are a little more recreational than the for students. So just a little bit, not even a little bit, a lot of everything. Frankly, the NASA page is a little overwhelming. But the speaker requests, meetings, educational opportunities, they do sometimes have, you can get a guest speaker over a webinar, talking to your kids. STEM education, lots of STEM related resources are on the NASA page. Somebody else very educational is the Smithsonian, and they also have a section, 3 sections: educators, families, students. So all kinds of, you can explore by topic: art, science and nature, history and culture, people and places. And if you go into the educators section, they have lesson plans that you can just download. They have activity sheets, and they do have an e-newsletter you can subscribe to that keeps you up to date with all of their new resources for teachers. And you notice their search box here, you can narrow it down not just by subjects, but by grades. So it's really well designed. Another one, the Treasury Department has financial literacy called mymoney.gov, and there is both a section for children, a page for children to use themselves, and then also a section for teachers and educators with different, again, lesson plans, games, videos, and even some federal student aid stuff mixed in there as well. But mostly it's stuff for teaching children. Coin collecting, cartoons, all kinds of fun stuff. Next, we have pedestrian safety. Once in a while, something will be a federal resource, but they'll have it as a .org instead of a .gov. But like in this case, it is still part of the U.S. Department of Transportation. So this is safe walking information broken out by different age groups. And then also they have a similar page for bicycling. So especially towards the end of the school year when everybody's hauling their bikes out, it can be a good lesson. The Peace Corps has a page of educator resources. They will bring speakers in to not bring them in, but hook you up online so they can talk about the country they visited or talk about their experiences. You can find lessons on specific countries, specific grade levels, various topics. So a good different sort of cultural option. The Patent and Trademark Office has activities and some really fun games for kids. And one thing I particularly like is they have a section here with articles on real children who received real patents for their inventions. So that's pretty fun. And some of them were like, this was a team of Girl Scouts who created something and got it patented. So some teen club at a library could do the same kind of thing. Information on intellectual property, which is a way also of talking about how they can't copy and paste things from the web. Building, making your own inventions, and some more complicated things for teenagers. Some videos on like 3D printing, anti-counterfeiting, driverless cars, that's very popular right now. Parents and teachers. And then information broken out by grade level. So they have some fun things there. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention this is just the landing page to lots of different sites that they have. Healthy lifestyle choices, questions on disabilities, rabies, bats, and summer camp, activity books on health, and then a few links to other, I think, college students, families with special needs. I guess they don't have this is one that doesn't have an educators section, but kids.gov is actually no longer working, so they haven't updated this in a little while. Ultimate STEM Guide for Kids. The EPA. Some of this, the EPA's website is under major construction. Things move or disappear every day. And sometimes they're just now in a different section, but the table of contents isn't updated. So it can be simplest just to Google to find that stuff. But here are classroom resources and project ideas, science fair project ideas, community service, homework help, and also grants and educator awards, and then children's health in the environment. And you can even order print materials over here. And contact your regional education coordinator to find local resources or invite staff to your school. So it's always nice when they have regional offices that might be able to do active outreach like that. In another section the EPA has is activities for kids specifically on recycling. So they have a bunch of activities and pages there, and it has its own resource page for teachers. And here's some more resources for students and educators specific to recycling. So good for Earth Day or any other time. Science fair information. And this is the student curriculum for healthy kids in a healthy environment. And so there are actual numbered lesson plans, 9 of them, that you can pick and choose which ones to use or just do the entire thing. It's geared, it can also be extracurricular groups or clubs, like so a scouting group could do these, or 4-H or anybody like that. Bureau of Labor Statistics, they have information on occupations and careers, including some games and quizzes, information on the economy geared to the right age level, and then resources for teachers as well, classroom activities. posters. The U.S. Department of Education doesn't have a lot, actually, because that's just not their area. But they do have a parents page that includes tips on helping your children learn mathematics, helping your child with homework tips for parents. So those can be nice to print out and send home. And here's an example. This is the Helping Your Child Learn Mathematics, and it's available in Spanish as well as in English, like doing math at the grocery store with your kids. Okay, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has a weather site called SciGinx with all kinds of great resources on understanding currents, outer space, hurricanes. There's a little glossary over here. Topics, games, resources for teachers, jack-o'-lantern stencils. So lots of STEM there. And then this is the Ocean Service part of the NOAA. So all kinds of games and informational videos on the ocean and the creatures that live in it. Oil spills. And then here's the actual education page for teachers. Sea levels, more games, and a few other. Science on a Sphere is a bit more complicated. This is high school level. The Department of the Treasury has an education page, so resources on currency, the mint, their history, and financial literacy. They also sometimes have a kids zone, but today it is asking me for a login. So yesterday it wasn't. FEMA has resources for kids. Although it's the FEMA website, they call themselves ready.gov as the URL, but it's FEMA. So section for kids, for parents, for educators, curriculum for different ages on emergency preparedness. But then over here, there is also information on, for example, what do we have? Tornadoes. And so they have documents that they link to, plus general information. Also winter storms, extreme cold is another one that can be pretty relevant. So fact sheets for kids, they're pretty big, but they warn you of that. The U.S. Department of Agriculture, another one that's pretty relevant, will have a lot of things that kids are already somewhat familiar with. And of course, there's the whole Ag in the Classroom program that North Dakota participates in. But here is a kids corner on dairy labs and cows and dairy products. And then there's also, well, that's thinking about loading, Science for Kids, which is about agricultural research. Beetles, that's a game. Choose My Plate, that's the current version of the food pyramid, so there's information there, and a few more. Fight Back, BAC, that's bacteria, so food safety. Forest Service, lots of links there. Junior Forest Ranger program, Smokey the Bear, kids page at the National Agricultural Library, backyard conservation, just it keeps going. There's the Ag in the Classroom program, 4-H. Here is an example of the nutritional page. It's called My Plate, and there are teacher guides broken out by grade level. You can get a CD of songs, posters, handouts for parents in several languages. The Natural Resources Conservation Service, part of the USDA, has its own teachers and students with a little worm mascot. Interactive features, clean water, farmers and ranchers, and where your food comes from. And then here are resources for teachers, lesson plans, databases, federal agencies that you can get additional information from, and a multimedia library with videos on the water cycle. And there's a conservation activity book for kids, which is broken out by sections, so you can just download and print off the ones that are relevant, or if you contact our local office, see, this part is actually the North Dakota version. They will usually send you some, depending if they're in stock. So that's nice. Here's another page that's specific to North Dakota. They have Mighty Mini Microbe, which is related to soil, and some PowerPoint presentations that can be used in class. And here's where you find Woodsy Owl. And then the Agricultural Research Service, still part of USDA. This is the non-Flash version. They have a fancier one with more games on the Flash one. So you've got science projects, teacher's desk, careers, videos, podcasts, recipes. Okay, stepping away from science for a little bit, we've got the Library of Congress has a Kids and Families page. Read.gov has a lot of classic books, and that you can, very old, that you can actually, they have digitized them, and they have book lists by subject, and the Young Readers Center. Oh. Those are programs specific to DC, but they definitely, authors webcasts. So here's some authors that they actually interviewed. Tiki Barber, he's talking about children's books. Jan Brett, really popular children's book illustrator, Neil Gaiman. So those can be fun. Stephen King. Today in History, historical newspapers that you can read, Everyday Mysteries of Science, Veterans History Project, poetry, the National Jukebox, so really old recordings of folk songs. The National Archives has distance learning programs for both teachers and students, so professional development webinars and History Day webinars, programs for different age groups, Bill of Rights, the Constitution, working with primary sources, that's a popular thing these days. The National Endowment for the Humanities has an educational site. There are both lesson plans and direct student resources. Art and culture, foreign languages, history and social studies, literature and language arts. Lots of on this day information. Recommended reading list for college-bound students. Holocaust Museum, Shakespeare. And they have also a newsletter that you can sign up for to stay up to date on their resources. The National Park Service has a lot of stuff for kids. Along with being a junior ranger, they have stuff specific to fishing, which of course is popular around here. Program to get fourth graders into national parks for free. Rivers, a bear cam up in Alaska, you can watch them eating fish. And then the Park Service also has a page for educators. So you can pick your subject, your grade level, Common Core, distance learning. They have traveling trunks, kind of like you can get from the Historical Society here in North Dakota. Classroom materials, science labs, summer workshops, all kinds of stuff. The Bureau of Land Management also has very similar, they also deal with parks, some outdoor classrooms for both teachers and for students. And then here is their teacher page with lesson plans and activity databases. Field classrooms. The Forest Service. The USDA is one of the more consistent agencies in terms of their websites across divisions, all doing the same thing, which is really handy. So lots of resources for the kids, coloring, videos, Woodsy Owl, Smokey the Bear, and then similar resources for the educators, multimedia tools, education partners, professional development opportunities. Okay. The U.S. Fire Administration is part of FEMA, and they have a Sesame Street themed fire safety program for younger children. And you can order all kinds of materials, posters, a CD of songs and stories, an educator's guide. And here's the information on how to request it. It's free for classes. And then there's additional educational programs for older kids, toolkits on developing your own fire safety program, trailers that you can add to them, preschoolers, community, older adults, education resources on consumer information, NetCetera toolkit. This is helping kids stay safe online, advertising, being smarter consumers, cyberbullying, and then similar things on a high school level, and also for just community educators, things in public libraries. Health and Human Services has a whole page linking you to K through 12 science and health resources. So forensics, genetics, health information tutorials, lesson plans, projects, careers. I think they have a newsletter on here as well. So lots of options there. The National Institute on Drug Abuse has a page for teachers. So this is geared mostly for high school students here. Free materials you can order, science fair activities, lesson plans, infographics, videos for students. Here's one, because it's summertime, here's a page on sunscreen and children. And if you go down to the bottom, they do have a section specifically for sun safety in schools. Protect your students, sun safety in schools, what you can do, and shade planning for America's schools, which is a guide to designing your playground to be shadier. There is also a page all about pool safety with a song by Laurie Berkner, which is very exciting. And then an app for kids to play on pool safety, and some activity posters. And then last, we have a defunct page. It used to be put out by the Department of Education, and it's obviously free resources. They retired it in June of 2015. And you can tell because some of these sites that they say to use instead are also now gone. But a lot of the links are still valid. And it's broken out by month, so it can still be a handy resource. You know, like for February, President's Day, African American history. You go into each of these pages and they have some suggestions, and some of the resources that they link to have been moved, but a lot of them are still valid. So it's at least worth poking around on. And it covers a wider range of things than you'll see elsewhere, because they put a lot of work into gathering all of this up together. Native American Heritage Month. And I mean, it is only 3 years old, so a lot of the stuff that they recommend is still out there, and it's an easy way to find it. So believe it or not, that is not everything that's out there, but it's an introduction. Really, any subject matter, if you try doing a search and just adding .gov and either kids or educators, it will tell you whether there's something out there that you can connect to. And it's all free, so that's handy. So thank you for listening. And if you have any questions either now or in the future, our contact information is right at the end here.